Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Security Repo Podcast. Please like and subscribe, share with your friends, and let everybody know about how we're spreading the message of security best practices out in the world with our awesome guests. Speaking of awesome guests, today we have with us Maria Khodak. She's a security engineer and pen tester at a large company focused on web application, API, and network testing. She also researches machine learning vulnerabilities, threat detection, and graph theory in her free time. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great meeting you.
It was great meeting you too, and thanks for coming on the show. You gave an awesome talk at that B-Sides, and I understand that was your first talk ever that you had given, right?
Well, I did speak at Insomniac about a month ago from today, so in March. That was a large Swiss conference, but it's my first talk in America, so that was
It was a
really
great
cool.
talk on using graph theory. Or maybe you could just tell us, what was the name of that talk?
So the talk I gave was called "Good Models Gone Bad: Visualizing Data Poisoning." So I wanted to visualize data poisoning, which is a machine learning vulnerability, using networks. So graph theory. I wanted to visualize data as a group of nodes and edges.
And this work with the graphene, this is all tied back to your work as a penetration tester, as a pen tester. I'm always curious people's journey into that field. How'd you get involved, and how did you become a pen tester?
Yeah, so the first time I did anything security related was in college when I took a modern binary exploitation class. I majored in computer science, but I wasn't super interested in cybersecurity at the time. That class was also really difficult, and it was basically like a reverse engineering class. So after that class, I thought all of cybersecurity was kind of like reverse engineering, and I sort of shied away from doing anything involved with it until after I graduated. And then I became a part of a rotational program. So first I went into vulnerability management before pen testing, but I found vulnerability management to be a little bit boring. So after that, I switched to pen testing, and it was an awesome opportunity. I learned so much more about cybersecurity and web app and network testing, and I really fell in love with the higher level aspects of it.
You mentioned something in there, rotation. What did you mean by that?
So a lot of companies nowadays, even government, like our government has rotational programs where you can basically go to like any team at it's usually a large company or the government, and you have like a variety of roles to pick from. You can do like software engineering, cloud related roles. And I chose a cybersecurity related role, which was originally vulnerability management, but there was not that much technical work in that role. So after a year, you can rotate into a different role, and you have basically your pick as long as the manager has room on their team. And pen testing had an opening, so I went into that.
I don't think you're the only person who got into vulnerability management and thought, "Wow, this is not fun." It's a very dry
Yeah.
field.
Yeah, we work close with vulnerability management, and we're under kind of that same umbrella in our security organization. And I really appreciate everything they do because they really keep things running. But I feel like you get to have a lot of fun as a pen tester.
Oh yeah, I think that's the coolest of the jobs that it draws the most people in, like
Yeah,
the hack the box. And
for sure.
uh, so I want to get back to what you had talked about in San Diego, and that is graphing and the visualization of relationships. So maybe we could just start there, super high level. What do you mean by visualization?
So, to a lot of people, data has an arbitrary meaning. Data has kind of like a meaning that could mean anything or any variable before it's defined by how we can visualize it. And like an easy way to visualize data is with data tables or spreadsheets. But another way to visualize data, and this kind of adds on to spreadsheets, is you can visualize data through relationships between data points via networks. So in my case, I chose to visualize with this open source software called Gephi, which I mentioned in the presentation very briefly. Um, and Gephi is this awesome tool that you can basically input a spreadsheet with nodes and edges, and it'll just plot it for you in any sort of configuration you'd like. It's very customizable.
So you gave the example there of a Java vulnerability, correct?
Um, yes, Java packages. Yeah.
And the thing that really popped out to me is, looking at a giant spreadsheet, it's pretty hard to figure out like, hey, what is the corrupting influence? Like, what's the flow of this? And that's when you showed that on the screen. I know this is a podcast, so we don't be able to share the screen here, but it really was like jumped out, especially when they color coded it, that hey, this little tiny group of nulls, of packages that contain something not right, really started reshaping the whole graph.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, my goal with visualizing data poisoning is to build a GUI, perhaps in Gephi or inspired by Gephi, to kind of point out for the user, hey, there's a difference in your data, which is what data poisoning is, right? It's just adding to data, changing the data, or subtracting from the data. So ultimately, I just want to be able to show in this point in time, your data was changed in some way, whether there's a large group of data points that was changed or a really, really small amount of data points was changed. Here's where it was changed. Perhaps your data was poisoned, and we can take a look at it closer.
Like, what's the danger in data poisoning? Like, the models are so large, they're ingesting so much data. Like, would it take like a massive amount of data to do anything nefarious, like a whole other training set?
Mostly yes, actually. So I took a workshop on machine learning vulnerabilities, and I remember the teacher was mathematically demonstrating that data poisoning actually has a small effect if you only poison like a few data points, but it's something that exponentially increases in terms of how much it would be a threat to a system. So the consequences of data poisoning are from the training data. So you're poisoning training data. You're not poisoning the model itself, which is a different vulnerability, which is model poisoning. Um, Poisoning the training data could have large consequences, could have small consequences. Obviously, when I gave that Java example with just those 3 points, that's not going to really do that much. The model would probably ignore it. But when you have a large scale poisoning vulnerability, that's when you'll see the damage reflected in the model later on.
So this ties back to pen testing. How do you use those data? Like, how are you leveraging this in your work?
Yeah, so as a pen tester, machine learning pen testing has become a very hot topic lately. A lot of a lot of groups or organizations are now interested in machine learning testing. And what a lot of people focus on is things like prompt injection, which is a completely separate vulnerability. And it is kind of more exciting in a way, like being able to kind of play with the model, and it's almost like social engineering in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But data poisoning is more of it's not even within the model itself. So when you're kind of implementing data poisoning, you're not doing much machine learning besides like what is theoretically possible. Um, so in terms of how it helps me with pen testing, it's kind of like a threat detection. So mapping the network would help you detect whether there is data poisoning or not. And I think mapping the network would go hand in hand with what I mean with visualization. And I think as humans, we can all use more visualization in terms of these theoretical concepts that we don't really necessarily understand until they're visualized for us.
Yeah. Again, you can look at spreadsheets. I have a brain that absolutely loves spreadsheets, but
Yeah.
that's something I keep getting told. Is like I don't see what you're talking about until I build a graph, until I actually make it pop out.
Yeah.
So, is this just making it easier for you to communicate this with your team, with the clients?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's all about conveying information in the best way possible, which I love spreadsheets too, actually. I think tables are a really easy way to ingest information. But what I wanted to do was take that a step further and build it out graphically, which I wanted to demonstrate in my talk, which I'll link on my blog.
Right on.
But yeah, visualizing is was the most important part for me.
So another example you gave, a little more fun example, a little less dry than Java, was you mapped all the characters from a pretty famous French novel, Les Miserables,
Yes.
which I have tried to read the book, but it is so long, it is so complex. Maybe I need the chart. Maybe I need a guide. Maybe you could talk about that. Like, what did you do?
So I took a network science class in college, and that's where I really fell in love with the idea of networks and graphical visualization. But the Les Miserables network was originally authored by Donald Knuth, who is a famous computer scientist and academic. And the Les Miserables example is used in beginner classroom level network science contexts to kind of demonstrate how a network can map out relationships and data points. Because we all like understand the conceptual idea of a book. Every time we read a novel or a fictional novel, we kind of map out different characters' relationships in our head subconsciously. And I think that the network kind of just visualizes that idea for us.
Right on. Yeah, I think if I actually went back and tried to read the book, I would need a study guide like that because so many characters. Uh, Also, I've tried to listen to it on Audible, and I don't know, not a book I could get into. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
not for everyone.
but the it's interesting. You could do that with anything. You could do that with Harry Potter. You could do that with pretty much any book. How are these characters interrelated, and just
Mhm.
visualize that a little bit better. Uh, all right. Well, we are getting to the point of the show where we always like to get to know our audience, our guests a little bit better. So we always ask the same four questions to the guests on the show. We'll start with the first one. What's your favorite all-time security command line tool?
So security command, I thought that question was interesting because for me, a lot of tools are a means to an end. So it's like, what can I do with the tools? How does this help me in pen testing? But I think my favorite security command line tool is really basic. I really like Nmap. There's just so much you can do. I think it inspired so many other tools as well. And I just like how it works, and I like all the documentation on it. So just very simple Nmap.
I mean, it's a good answer. It's a good tool. All right. So you're fairly young in your career, so I don't imagine you've had hundreds and hundreds of interviews. But do you have a favorite interview question you've been asked that stands out?
So I like when the interview is more of a conversation, I suppose. Um, I think it's much more fun to just talk about like what kind of projects I'm doing and what kind of projects they're doing and kind of how we can meet in the middle. Um, so I just like to learn about like what kind of tools and what kind of value can I kind of bring to their team and what kind of value they would bring to me as well. So I just like I like it when like there's more of a conversation and questions are more of a kind of guide points for the conversation itself.
Fair enough. Uh, what is the best security advice that you can give us?
So, the best security advice I can give is to believe that anything is achievable, and being curious about everything will get you really far. And to add on to that, finding the patterns between everything that you study and everything that you learn, and realizing that everything is similar and connected to other concepts that you've learned. That kind of skill is one of the most valuable skills I've developed. So, finding that everything at its core is very similar to one another is was very valuable for me.
Really taking a holistic view of the thing, not just focusing in on like the one little piece in isolation, but how does this work in the larger world?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, cybersecurity is just like filled with random acronyms and so many things that you don't really understand until you really look at what that object is at its fundamental level. And then you realize, like, oh, this is really similar to this other thing I learned, or it's this concept that is always the same in this type of scenario.
All right.
Actually, for example, machine learning is kind of, or machine learning testing, like pen testing, is very similar to web app testing. I would say that it's like a subset of web app testing. Same thing with mobile testing. So,
And that's the OWASP view of the world, is like everything's an application or
yeah,
related to an application.
exactly. But it's that application layer of things, like there's definitely differences in like network testing, for example, different methodologies.
Right on. And then the fun question we ask everyone: what's the worst security advice you've ever heard?
Um, yeah, it's a fun question. Um, I think the worst security advice is uh, some types of subfields in cybersecurity are uh, very gatekeepy, I guess. There's a lot of fields that will kind of like have like a large skill, um, like skill ramp up. Like it takes a lot of time and energy to learn certain concepts in certain fields, and I think some people kind of discourage that, or they think that like, oh, I put in so much effort, and they don't necessarily like to see other people doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's not good at all for the field, and I think we should be more open to giving advice and helping other people learn as much as possible.
100% agree on that. That's something that's come up in a number of talks I've attended recently. Is this gatekeeping, especially in red
Yeah,
team, especially in the offensive security space. Uh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
let's all work to be more inclusive on that.
Hmm.
Uh, so I'm curious, just like technology wise, what's on the horizon that you're looking at that's getting you excited? Any new projects or any new tech you're messing around with these days?
Yeah. So I've been kind of as a pen tester. You do things at a very high level. So you, like for example, you open up Burp Suite, you analyze requests, but you don't really get to analyze code as much. So I've been getting into reviewing code itself, and looking and being able to kind of point out vulnerabilities before we get to the stage of okay, we have to test this application. Let's figure out what's wrong with it. I think helping developers build better code is what my goal has started to be as a pen tester. Um, and also, like I said, with my visualizing data poisoning project, I am hoping to build out like a solid GUI that anyone can kind of go into and insert their data and check if it's been poisoned over time.
Interesting. Definitely moving you're moving closer to the world of security engineering, which I think is the superheroes of the world that we don't really talk about that much. But how do we get developers to work more safely and make the safe way the easiest and fastest path? So,
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think it's kind of the next step, and I've always like to challenge myself and do more difficult things. And I think analyzing code is the next step.
so we always like to give the floor to our guests. Anything you want to say, anything you get off your chest, say, or anything you want to plug.
Yeah, we should use more graph theory in cybersecurity. I think that's kind of my um, like the message I want to spread. And I think threat detection is before we get to the vulnerabilities. That's most important.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's been great having you, and look forward to running to you again out there at another B-Sides or another security conference soon.
Yeah, I'll see you. Thanks for having me.